For almost 3 weeks, I thought the noises above my room were completely normal. Every old house makes sounds. Wood expands, pipes shift, the roof settles. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. But one night, I looked up, and for a split second, I saw a face looking down at me from the ceiling. This happened when I was 23 years old. At the time, I had just moved into a rental house. The place wasn't expensive. Actually, it was suspiciously cheap. The owner explained that the previous tenants had moved out unexpectedly. I didn't think much about it. The house looked fine. Nothing seemed unusual. It had 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a living room, and a narrow hallway connecting everything together. The first few days were completely normal. I unpacked my things, set up my furniture, started settling in. Nothing strange happened. Then, about a week later, I started hearing noises, very faint noises, coming from above my bedroom ceiling. At first, it sounded like scratching, the kind of sound you would expect from a squirrel, or maybe a rat. It happened mostly at night, never during the day. I wasn't concerned. The house was old. Animals sometimes got into attics. It wasn't a big deal, or at least, that's what I thought. The scratching continued every night, always after midnight, always above my room. Sometimes it lasted only a few seconds. Sometimes it continued for almost an hour. I bought a small flashlight and checked the attic entrance in the hallway. Everything looked normal. No signs of damage, no signs of animals. Nothing. A few nights later, the scratching changed. It became footsteps, slow footsteps, heavy footsteps, not running, not walking normally, more like somebody carefully moving around, trying not to be heard. That's when I started feeling uncomfortable. Animals don't walk like that, at least, not the animals I knew. One night, I was lying in bed watching videos on my phone. The footsteps started again. This time, they were directly above me. I muted my phone and listened. Step, pause, step, pause, step. The sound moved from one side of the room to the other, then stopped. Right above my bed, I remember staring at the ceiling, completely still, waiting, listening. The silence felt worse than the footsteps. After about 30 seconds, the sound started moving away again. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I called my landlord. He told me it was probably an animal. Then he laughed and said, "Old houses make old house noises." That answer didn't help. Over the next week, other strange things started happening. Small things, easy things to ignore. Food would disappear. Not entire meals, just small amounts. A few slices of bread, a banana, half a bag of chips. I blamed myself. Maybe I forgot I ate them. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. Then one morning, I found something strange. A kitchen cabinet was open, not wide open, just slightly. I clearly remembered closing it before going to bed. I checked the rest of the kitchen. Everything seemed normal. Still, I felt uneasy. A few days later, I came home from work and immediately noticed something different. A chair in my living room had moved only a few inches, but enough for me to notice. I stood there for a moment, trying to convince myself that I had left it that way. The problem was, I knew I hadn't. That night, the footsteps returned, louder than ever. For the first time, I heard something drop, a heavy thud, directly above my bedroom. The entire ceiling vibrated slightly. I jumped out of bed, turned on every light in the house, and grabbed a baseball bat. I don't know what I expected to find, but I checked every room anyway. Nothing. Everything looked normal. The attic entrance remained closed. No signs of forced entry. No signs of anyone being there. The next day, I bought a security camera. Nothing fancy. Just a cheap camera with motion detection. I pointed it toward the hallway, mostly because the attic entrance was there. Then I went to work. That evening, I checked the footage. Nothing unusual. The next day, still nothing. Then, on the third night, the camera sent a motion alert at 3:14 a.m. I opened the app immediately. At first, the hallway looked empty. Then I noticed something. The attic hatch. It wasn't completely closed anymore. It was hanging open slightly, only by an inch or two, but enough to notice. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, waiting. The hallway remained still. Then, very slowly, the hatch moved a little farther. I watched in complete disbelief. Something was pushing it open from above. The video froze, then disconnected. I sat there staring at my phone, unable to move, unable to think. I told myself there had to be an explanation. There had to be. But deep down, I already knew something was wrong. The next day, I took time off work. I wasn't leaving that house alone anymore. I bought another camera, this time for my bedroom. That night, I stayed awake, watching, waiting, listening. Nothing happened for hours. Then around 2:45 a.m., I heard it, the footsteps, much closer this time, almost directly overhead. I stared at the ceiling. The sound stopped. And then, something happened. A tiny piece of dust fell from above. Then another, like something was crawling directly over me. My heart started racing. I couldn't look away. Suddenly, I noticed something near the corner of the ceiling. A small gap. A dark opening I had never paid attention to before. And inside that darkness, I saw movement. Very slight movement. I leaned forward, trying to see better. And then, I saw it. An eye looking directly at me. I jumped backward so fast I nearly fell off the bed. The eye disappeared instantly. The footsteps exploded into frantic movement, running, crawling, moving rapidly above me. I grabbed my phone and ran outside. I didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. Police arrived within minutes. I told them everything. At first, they seemed skeptical until they checked the attic. The officers went up first. One of them immediately called for backup. That was the moment I knew I wasn't imagining anything. The attic contained blankets, food wrappers, water bottles, and personal belongings. Someone had been living up there for weeks, maybe longer. The worst part? They found a small opening directly above my bedroom, a place where someone could look down into my room. The officers searched the entire property, but the person was gone. They had escaped before police arrived. Nobody was ever arrested. Nobody was ever identified. I moved out 3 days later. I didn't pack carefully. I didn't say goodbye. I just left. Even now, years later, I still think about one thing. If the camera hadn't caught that attic hatch moving, I probably would have stayed. And if I had stayed, I don't want to imagine what might have happened next. Sometimes, the scariest thing isn't a ghost. It isn't a monster. It isn't something supernatural. Sometimes, it's the realization that somebody has been watching you the entire time, and they were a lot closer than you ever thought.